Today, we're going to be talking about child labor. One, where it came from. Two, how bad it got. And three, what it looks like today. So stay tuned. When you hear child labor, what comes to your mind? Maybe images of old black and white photos, little children in their overalls doing chimney sweep, or little kids in factories working on assembly lines with their tiny hands. You'd be right, but the story goes much deeper. Okay, let's start the story from the very beginning. Throughout most of mankind, children work. And as your parents or grandparents would say, it was just the way things were. In colonial America, Puritan values were highly held. That meant hard work over idleness, and this applied to children as well. Children often worked on family farms and as indentured servants. Boys often began apprenticeships between ages 10 to 14 to learn a trade. So there was actually a law called England's Poor Law. This was introduced in 1575. England's Poor Law required local parishes to fund work for the poor and children. The goal was to discourage laziness and poverty. Society back then truly believed that if we put kids to work, it would prevent them from becoming poor. And the real irony is children were already poor back then. So the Industrial Revolution was when things got really bad. In 1793, there was a mill named after Samuel Slater, and basically he built America's first textile mill in Rhode Island. And some of the youngest children working there were between ages 7 and 8. Employers love children workers. For one, they're cheaper than adults. Two, they're easy to train because they learn quicker. Three, they're more obedient and compliant. Four, they're less likely to complain or quit. This is a general idea of the horrible working conditions back then. Children worked in mines, glass factories, textile mills, and farms. They also worked as newsboys, messengers, and street vendors, and the work was often dangerous and deadly. Let's dive into a specific sample. In the coal mines, children were known as breaker boys. Their job was to pick slate by hand for hours in the coal mines. If you ever worked in a mine, you know it's dangerous. The spaces are often tight and small, and mines often collapse. Things fall, rocks. There's also rodents, bats, and who knows what else down there, and it's extremely dark. And there were frequent injuries in all this. And boys as young as 9 years old would work all day long. Supervisors would beat the children if they worked too slowly. And this heartbreaking quote from a 9-year-old boy who worked in the mines. And he said, "I always think of my poor blind father and my mother at home, and I won't ever be able to play with the children." In 1870, the first U.S. census reported that child laborers were 750,000 workers under the age of 15. This doesn't include children who worked on the farms for the family or did family businesses. You might be wondering, when did people figure out that having child workers was wrong? So let's talk about the reform movement. It definitely took a while. The movement was initially fueled by the concern of lack of education for children rather than the concern for the dangerous labor they did. It wasn't about, oh, this is really cruel to have children at this age working in mines. It was about, oh, these children can't read. We have a problem. About priorities. So in May 1813, Connecticut passed a law that required children to learn reading, writing, and math. And this was required specifically for employees to provide schooling to teach these things. One of the big turning points for this movement was in 1908, when a photographer named Louis Wright was employed by the National Child Labor Committee to document child workers worldwide. His photographs allowed people to see that there are real children working, not just statistics, and to see the horrible working conditions that they were in. In 1903, Mother Jones organized a protest for working children called the March of the Mill Children. The protest took place from Philadelphia to Theodore Roosevelt's summer home in Oyster Bay, New York, and basically demanded better working conditions for children. Progress was slow in general. In 1916, Congress passed the Keating-08. Basically, it banned interstate sales of items that were produced by child laborers. But this was revoked 2 years later by the Supreme Court. So all that work was undone. Then finally, in 1938, Theodore Roosevelt signed the Fair Labor Standards Act, which included limits on many forms of child labor. The Fair Labor Standards Act also included children ages all the way up to 18, which was huge at this time. And it also listed specific jobs that were too dangerous for them to perform. Okay, so now that we looked at our past, let's look ahead, the future and current day. Though the fight still continues. You probably don't see as many children working in factories or mines, especially in North America. It's definitely unheard of. According to ILO, UNICEF report, child labor remains a huge issue globally, despite the decades of progress. As of 2025, approximately 160 million children are still engaged in child labor worldwide. So that's about 1 in 10 children. And 79 million of these child laborers are specifically engaged in dangerous work. So you're probably thinking, where's this child labor happening? A lot of it's happening in Africa, where about 92 million child laborers continue to work. Then it's by Asia, not surprising, and the Pacific. Agriculture, specifically farming, is the largest employer of child laborers. Around 70% of all child laborers are in this sector. And yes, the children working in fields and farms in conditions no child should ever experience. And here's what specifically progress since 2016 reports highlight that climate change, conflict, and economic instability really worsening the conditions for child laborers. We're not just dealing with old problems, we're also dealing with new problems like climate change, pushing more children into work. And most often, child labor occur when families are in debt and in poverty and they need someone to bring home money. This could also be due to someone in the family having illness or loss of caregiver, and the result is basically children have to go to work to cover for a parental loss, and often they don't have any other choice. And sadly, it can lead to slavery and often sexual exploitation, and of course, it cuts children off from very vital accesses to education, so they can't go to school anymore. So what can be done? The UNICEF and ILO are calling for governments to invest in social protection for vulnerable households, strengthen child protection systems, provide universal quality education, and ensure decent work for adults and youth. And this is happening in 2025, which is wild. And just because it's not really happening in your backyard doesn't mean that it's not happening. So it's going to take every one of us who really cares to make a change and allow children to be children. So it could change for these children out there too. And yes, progress is being made, but there's still so much to do. Make sure you like this episode and share with a friend and subscribe for more. Okay, so today's sponsor is Kind Laundry. Just kidding, they're not really a sponsor, but I do have an affiliate code. Kind Laundry use natural ingredients and it actually comes in these sheets. So much more useful than liquid laundry detergent because that stuff gets messy. With Kind Laundry, you can bring this anywhere. It's literally in a box, pack in your suitcase, and it's that easy. You can get 10% off by using code ZeroWasteCute.